Welcome back, Wellness Warriors, to Health Huddle. Today's topic is nutrition, and today we're talking with Andrew Williams, RDN, and I hope you all are ready to listen to all the information that we have for you today.
Yeah, my name is Andrew. I'm a registered dietitian. I work more in critical care. I don't really do any outpatient stuff. I work primarily in surgical oncology and bone marrow transplant. So I do a lot of things like after surgery and things like that, and just trying to help patients like eat better during like oncology treatment and stuff like that too. So I'm on the opposite spectrum probably of like getting people to like lose weight and things like that, but I'm more on like kind of promoting like weight gain and like trying to maintain like muscle mass and things like that of that nature too. I do a lot of, I think, a common conception about like what dietitians do clinically is like, I think a lot of people think we just kind of tell people what to eat and things like that too. We're kind of doing a lot of other things behind the scenes, like giving like vein nutrition recommendations, doing enteral feeds, providing educations, deciding on like right diets to send patients home depending on like disease state and things like that too. So
Thank you for introducing yourself and joining us today. The first question that I would love for you to answer you would be, what are some common nutrition myths related to weight loss and fitness? But you don't have to say fitness, just overall health.
okay. I think a big thing is like I think there's so many like bad diets across the board these days too, like on the internet and things like that too. Like we have the keto diet, we have the carnivore diet, we have all kinds of different things like going around these days too. But the main thing about weight loss is a calorie deficit is the biggest
Mhm.
thing too. I worked a lot with I used to work outpatient like bariatrics and things like that too for like weight loss surgery. A lot of times we would give people like caloric goals and things like that too. But always kind of talk to like a registered dietitian about like your calorie goals and things like that too for like estimating energy needs because that kind of depends on like your fitness levels and things like
Mhm.
that too. The only true way like weight loss wise is like a calorie deficit in a healthy way, okay? I do not recommend anybody doing anything like under 1,500 calories a day, 1,200 calories, anything like that. People that need that are pediatric patients at this point too. So just kind of like you need to like talk to somebody like expertise, like nutrition wise, to kind of figure out your calorie goals for like weight loss and things like that too. So
Okay. I can also say, like, for me, like with the clients, I emphasize, like, what people that want to lose weight, I say a calorie deficit, because that's the best way. Like, you still, if there's certain foods you want to eat, you can still eat that within that deficit, but also just be mindful. Like, if you want to eat something unhealthy, that's going to take up the highest portion of your calories. And with, like, you talking with the fad diets, I'm also not a fan of those because we, people don't do enough research. And then again, is there's experts out here that could tell you about this stuff, but you got all your information from the internet, and everything you find there is not the right information, and it's hard to explain that to people.
yeah, definitely.
All right, let's go into question number two. Can you explain the importance of balancing macronutrients such as proteins, carbohydrates, and fats in a healthy diet?
So all those kind of nutrients and things like that, they all like provide some kind of thing for living healthy lives and things like that, and energy levels and things like that. You need proteins and things like that because like each one contains like different like some of these different like macronutrients contain like different kinds of like micronutrients as well too. So like getting enough protein and stuff like that to maintain muscle mass, to gain muscle mass and things like that. And your brain runs off of glucose as well too. So like eating enough carbs and things like that is also essential for like your mental health as much as it giving you enough energy and things like that too. Because whatever we don't use, whatever we, if say we're like fasting or anything like that, we're pretty much living off like our liver, like stored glycogen and things like that too. So that's a big thing too about energy levels as well too. Because if you're not taking any carbs in or anything like that, you're gonna have trouble with energy levels and like performing right, maybe in the gym or like whatever like athletic thing you're into. So.
And the last set of questions under diet, nutrition, and exercise, what are some simple, actionable steps people can take to improve their diet and nutrition?
I always tell people this is to kind of like kind of take nutrition as a glance and everything like that too. We're all going to have days where maybe we don't eat as healthy or something like that. I always tell people it's about balance and stuff, and like too much of anything is a bad thing as well too.
Hmm.
So like if you continue to overeat and things like that and eat like bad and stuff like that, you're just going to kind of keep on snowball effect and things like that too. But like, I mean, I have a donut every now and then too. Like, it's not like it's just like it's ever we're gonna it's and also like restricting yourself too much with anything is going to cause you to kind of binge it later on too. Because like people have cheat days and things like that too. Try to incorporate that stuff too, so you don't go all out or something like that on a day. Because the more we kind of restrict for things, the more we're going to crave it and want to like consume a lot of it in one sitting instead of like having one cookie and a week or something, like one cookie every other day or something like that, or every day. You're going to end up like on a Saturday or something like that. Well, I've been good all week, so I'm going to eat a dozen. And that's kind
Yeah.
of how that kind of snowball effects too. So I always try to tell people incorporate some kind of fun thing in your diet every day too, because one cookie isn't going to make or break you or anything like that. So
I completely agree. I myself have cheat days, and I find that is beneficial, but
yeah,
I'm not out here binge eating anything. When I say a cheat day, I might just have like one bad meal, and I'm also like currently in the process of cutting sweets out of my diet, but that's something that takes time. I used to not have it in my diet, so now I'm working to get it back out. So it's just all about not being so hard on yourself.
that's what I always tell people too, is like don't be so hard on yourself if you have like some kind of like something that's like a bad food or anything like that too, because you can incorporate anything into your diet. So yeah.
All right, so let's get into the second set of questions, and this is nutritional needs for health. This first question is something that is centered around Wellness Warrior, but is how does nutrition play a role in preventing chronic disease like heart disease, diabetes, and certain types of cancer?
Yeah, so that's a big thing too, is like I think nutrition can be like it's very like a beneficial like pre like requisite to like a lot of these like disease states and things like that too. Cause like we get these patients in with like all these like cardiac issues and things like that too. And like a big thing, they come in and they've been eating these like high fat, like high sodium diets and stuff like that. They get fluid retention. It can cause like impact on your heart because you gotta kind of think of your heart as like a water hose kind of effect. So if we're building up all this plaque and stuff like that in our vessels and things like that, it's going to kind of constrain it a little
Mhm.
bit. So you're going to cause more pressure, and your heart's going to have to work twice as hard to pump all stuff through that too. So, and that's just like a big thing too, because like a lot of things, it's just like you're eating uncontrollably all the time. Diabetes can occur, things like that too. Just like all these kind of things can kind of, if we had like more education, I feel like in school and like maybe going forward in college, and like as people get older and they have more well-rounded nutrition knowledge, I feel like a lot of these disease states could be kind of prevented or like because I think a lot of the things that happen these days are diet-based and lifestyle-based that kind of occur with these things. Some things are genetic as well too, so it just kind of depends too. So
Yeah, and I can definitely like piggyback off of that. I looked in a study in in my doctoral program, I was looking into a study where you could implement food banks to help with cardiovascular disease. And at first I was like, how? But I understand because food banks, healthier food, and just again with the education piece, teaching people that you can eat healthy, but it's not something to be afraid of. The same foods you eat now, you can do that. And also, one of my biggest things that I tell people is fresh veggies over canned. Um, Look at the ingredients on canned veggies versus fresh. The fresh veggies is that veggie itself is not sodium, all of this extra stuff. And most of the time is, well, they go bad within a week. Exactly. It's meant for you to eat within that week because it's fresh. So it's just also learning how to grocery shop and understand what you need.
I think a big people don't have access. We have a lot of I'm in Iowa right now working, and there's a lot of food deserts out here too, where
Hmm.
there's not available like fresh stuff available as much and stuff like that too. But there are like canned stuff has a lot. There's a lot of lower sodium options these days too with stuff, and stuff's packed in water and things like that too. But they do add all these like all this sodium and stuff like that into
Hmm.
these canned things because back in the day, how they preserve meats and things like that too is like they soaked it in salt and things like that to prevent microorganisms from growing on it too. I also tell people frozen stuff can be just as beneficial too, because you're locking in the nutrients like when it was there and fresh and stuff like that too. So if you can't get fresh, frozen's just as good. So I always just tell people that too, and it kind of prevents things from like degrading and stuff too, because as
Mhm.
vegetables and stuff age and stuff like that, they tend to lose some of their like vitamin effectiveness and things like that too. So
So let's get into, since you just like we kind of hitting on it. So what are some key nutrients that most people are deficient in, and how can we ensure that we're getting enough?
the biggest one I see these days probably, and like I see a lot of people that come in, so like hospitals diagnose like malnutrition and stuff like that, and they need my diagnosis too to be able to, doctors need that to be able to diagnose it and things like that. The biggest thing I see probably vitamin D is the biggest one, deficiency in like calcium and things like that too. Because as we usually top off after we stop storing stuff after a certain age and like bone density and things like that too. So I think calcium and vitamin D are probably the biggest ones. And I always tell people because I think there's a big thing against like dairy products these days too. Like nobody's wanting to do dairy and things like that too. But a lot of things these days are more, how do I say this? Like back in like the 80s or 90s, they started fortifying a lot of cereals and things like that too, because they noticed all these deficiencies starting to pop up with younger kids and things like that too. But vitamin D wise and like calcium and stuff like that, I always tell people to like eat some dairy and things like that too. Like include like Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, any things that don't be afraid of that stuff unless you have some underlying like medical condition where it's kind of you're not able to do those things too. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one I've seen. Like iron, a lot of people are anemic these days too. So
Mhm.
a lot of times getting like enough like stuff in too, because like a lot of people are going like more vegetarian things like that these days too. But eating enough iron like and stuff like that, and have some orange juice or some kind of like vitamin C product too, because like vitamin C can actually enhance the absorption of iron by almost like 2000% as well too. So that's something. Yeah.
I didn't know that last part, so that's also informative for me.
Yeah.
And then the last question underneath this would be, how can we build a healthy relationship with food?
That's the thing is like I see a lot of that these days too. Is like people have very like unhealthy relationships with food because think people think about it too much, you know. We're always thinking about what's our next meal, what's this, what's that, and stuff like that. Even like as a dietitian and stuff like that too, I talk about like food all day long.
Hmm.
That's a big thing for me too. Is like I try not to complicate it too much, you know. I try just to make like healthier choices and things like that too. I think people overcomplicate things. I always try to use like I think the my chart thing is a very like my plate kind of thing is a very well thing to kind of do where you have like a quarter of your plate's going to be protein, half the plate's going to be like fruits or vegetables, and like a quarter of it's going to be some kind of like starchy vegetable. And like I just try to incorporate that into my diet as well too. So eating enough, like don't overcomplicate it. Try to get some protein at each meal. Try to get some vegetables. Try to get some kind of non-starchy carb. You can have starchy carbs, that's fine too. But just kind of balance everything out too. Because like I said, too much of anything can be a bad thing as well too. So. But
Hmm.
also not trying, don't be listening to like what these influencers and stuff like that are saying like on TikTok, all these like things too, because like that may work for them, but it's not going to work for everybody. Okay. Because we're looking at all these people with like these elite like builds and stuff like that too. And a lot of it's genetics and things like that too. And like this is what they eat to maintain them, but that's not you. So yeah.
You touched on influencers, and I struggle with that in the industry that I'm in as well. And it's for a time being, I followed some fitness influencers just to, see. One of them was making fun of obese people, and I'm like, this is the reason why people don't work out, but it's deeper than that. Like genetics come into play, and like we're talking about right now, nutrition. Some people have those unhealthy habits with food, but it's deeper than that, and it's just as long as these fitness influencers are even like doing these type of workouts to show people like this is what worked for me, again, like certain workouts don't work for everyone, and that's where I'm coming into play with helping people understand the true importance of exercise, that it's not necessarily a one size fits all thing. You have to dig deeper to understand like what works for me, what underlying health conditions do I have that I also need to work on, and it's a never ending battle.
It is definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
So the last of questions is under common misconceptions about nutrition. And this first one I think is so important because we talked about fats and people are iffy on that. So many people believe that fats are bad, but can you explain the difference between healthy and unhealthy fats?
Yeah, so overall fats are important in our diet and things like that too, because like so if we didn't take in fat, we wouldn't be able to absorb vitamin A, D, E, and K, which are all fat soluble vitamins and stuff. And we need fat in our diet to be able to absorb those into our system. And if we're not getting those vitamins in, it can cause a whole bunch of other deficiencies and cause like some underlying like physical issues and things like that too. Because like if you're not getting enough vitamin D in because you're not having enough fat in your diet or something like that too, they can cause like cardiac issues and a whole bunch of other stuff can like kind of come into play with that too. But I deal with a lot of like pancreatitis and things like that too, where they're having to do like low fat diets and stuff like that too. But the biggest thing I always tell people, you have two types of fats. You have saturated and you have unsaturated fats, okay? Saturated fats have a longer like hydrogen kind of thing, longer like hydrogen chain compared to like unsaturated. So unsaturated are easier for our bodies to digest and things like that too. And the saturated ones tend to build up plaque and things like that too. I always tell people to go for like plant-based fats and things like that too. And like having like animal fat in your diet and stuff like that, that's fine too. It's like I said, like too much of anything is a bad thing, okay? If we're eating a whole bunch of like fried foods all the time, eating a lot of red meat all the time, that's like higher in fat too. We're obviously going to cause some issues and things like that too. I always tell people like using like olive oil and like those other like unsaturated fats are like probably the best ones to be doing too, because it's easier for our body to break down, prevents less buildup in our arteries and things like that, and causing like more underlying issues going on. But overall, we do need fats in our diets too. So I always tell people to kind of choose unsaturated versus saturated fats. So
And now that we talked about fats, and hopefully everyone understands that, this next one is what are some common misconceptions about sugar and its impact on health?
So working in oncology, the biggest thing I hear all the time is sugar causes cancer. Not true. Okay. Um, Sugars and things like that, you got to think about it like this, like everything that like carbs and things like that, it gets broken down and stuff in our body and like it's free floating like glucose and things like that. Okay. I always tell people I think the guidelines right now are like no more than like 15 grams of added like sugar a day or something like that too. The thing is like I always tell people like sugar is going to be processed like anything else, but also I always tell people too much of anything is a bad thing as well.
Hmm.
Okay. Doing all this added sugar and stuff like that, it's like not going to have like long-term good health effects and stuff like that too. But getting sugar from like natural sources like fruits and things like that too is probably the best way to go, I think, in my opinion. But yeah, sugar, you can have it in your diet. It's not going to cause any like severe like impact issues right away. It's like I said, like too much of anything is a bad thing, okay? We're constantly eating like cakes and cookies and like that stuff throughout the day and stuff like that too. It's going to be hard. Our bodies are going to become like more insulin resistant and not be able to, it's going to get all that stuff in there, not produce as much insulin. And that's when diabetes starts to occur and
Hmm.
stuff like that too. So, yeah.
And since you like touched on diabetes, again, people, the way to like prevent diabetes and also manage it better is through exercise, more so type 2, but also we don't want you to get to that point. We
No.
do not.
And that's the thing too, is like I feel like a lot of people like to harp on like diabetes and things like that these days. So most of the time I see it in here, it's got some underlying issues that have been occurring
Mhm.
too, like pancreatitis, like your pancreas produces all your insulin and stuff like that. And if it's altered and not working properly, obviously you're gonna have some issues and stuff like that, and that can induce like type 2 diabetes. But some people are born with type 1 where it's like genetic and like they're just born with it, where their body doesn't produce enough insulin and stuff like that too. So it's just kind of like you got to kind of look at everything and like talk to health professionals like dietitians these days. We have to have a master's and go through like very like extensive like training and things like that these days. So talk to health professionals about things like that too, because it's very important in these two. Because I think a lot of times, like I said again, like we were talking about influencers and stuff, they're more like for the people that are healthy populations and things like
Hmm.
that too. We have all these people these days that have other medical issues going on. There's genetic issues that can cause problems with like processing glucose and things like that too. So we have to look at all underlying issues when like kind of niching nutrition towards different people and stuff like that too. So
And before I get into this last question, I want to hit on like you talked about how you have to have a master's. I'm a college professor, so like I told my students that personally, I don't like how in my industry you can get a nutrition certification. I told them that's harping on the field because you mean to tell me this person, you want to go to someone who got a certification to try to tell you how to eat and all of this stuff when it's much deeper than that. For me personally, I give nutritional guidance, but there's certain foods you can eat to reach your goals and like the protein, all of that, and calorie deficit. But that's as far as I can go. And I think, again, like with how people can easily get certifications. They think, oh, I'm automatically qualified. And I'm not harping on anyone who has a certification, but that's it's much more to it.
yeah, and I always try to tell people this too, like every state that I work in as a dietitian, I have to have a license in that state and I have to meet by certain guidelines and stuff like that too. And there was a woman in Texas recently that got sued for millions of dollars because she was a quote unquote like nutritionist and was giving out nutrition advice and she caused a whole bunch of health issues and things like that too. So you have to be very careful about that
Hmm.
too. Doctors don't even have like very much nutrition knowledge either. They get maybe one class on it. I've spent 5, 6 years studying it at this point, like before I even become a dietitian. And like the good thing is like I'm at a teaching hospital right now. I learn something every day too. So I'm always like learning all the time. And dietitians have to keep up with educations and things like that too. Like I have to meet almost like 60 hours, like 75 hours every like 3 or 4 years to be able to keep my like RD and credentials and stuff like that too. So we're always constantly learning and evolving and things like that too. Whereas like after you like go online and get your little like get a nutrition certification or something like that, that's where it ends. You're not learning
Hmm.
anymore. And nutrition is one of those fields. It's constantly evolving. We're constantly learning new things too. So yeah,
And the last question is, what are some healthy and sustainable ways to lose weight?
I always tell people this is like I try to tell people kind of avoid fast food. Like, like a lot of those things these days, they're all high calorie and like everything these days has like the calorie stuff on there too. Like go to McDonald's, go to Taco Bell, look at the calories on there too. Like a Crunchwrap Supreme, I think it has like almost like 650 calories like per thing on there too. And if you're eating that and then something else at each meal, you're almost consuming like 1,000 calories at a meal. Okay. And like that's the thing is all these items like fast food wise, most of them are more calorie dense and stuff like that. I'm not saying all of them are, and it's okay to have that stuff here and there, but like just not every day. Because the thing is the more you're in a surplus and you're not burning it off or anything like that, you're gonna keep on building weight and stuff like that too. And also I tell people to like look at it like this. It takes almost like 3,500 calories of excess like caloric intake every day to be able to like for a pound of fat to occur and stuff like that. And that's hard for like a lot of people to be able to do and stuff like that too. So don't be too hard on yourself if you have like a cheat day or something like that too, because like it's going to take a lot to kind of undo all the work maybe you've already previously done and stuff like that too. But I always tell people to kind of focus on like plants and things like that too, like in our diet, like vegetables and stuff. Like I said, the my plate kind of situation. Half our plate with like fruits or vegetables. Because the thing is like those things are less calorie dense, okay? You're getting most of your calories and stuff from like the protein and the starchy carbs that are going to be on that plate too. If those are the quarter of the plate, it's going to naturally kind of induce like you're going to be like in a calorie negative and things like that too. So going for like those more like and plus, those things have like a more volume and stuff. You can eat a lot of it for like less calories and stuff like that too. So, yeah.
Thank you. And before we close out, are there any final words of advice for our viewers on improving their overall health and well-being?
I just tell people kind of like get your steps in every day. Like if you want to do anything, just start there because you'll be so surprised how much just like doing a little bit every day is going to kind of improve things too. I always tell my patients too, like when I was doing like stuff for like bariatrics and stuff like that too, people spend a lifetime building these habits and things like that too. It's like I don't know, like we have like a lot of like chronic smokers and stuff like that come through here and stuff like that too. They're addicted to it, you know, like they spent all this time like building these like bad habits and stuff like that. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's gonna take time and like smaller steps and stuff like that too, is like and being ready to change is what the biggest thing is too, is I always try to look at that too when I talk to people as well. But like just doing something little every day, you know, like eating like including like an extra like fruit or vegetable in your diet every day, something like that. Just a little bit every day is gonna overall, and you'll be surprised how much change little tiny effects can make too.
Hmm.
And just like getting your steps in every day too, you'd be surprised how much that can impact people too that were pretty sedentary to begin with. So yeah,
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for being our second guest under this segment of Health Huddle. I appreciate your expert guidance and opinion. Well, not necessarily opinions, it's just what's true on this topic that is always like misunderstood and misexplained, especially with how access to the internet is so easy and people don't understand like what's good and what's bad. And I hope that these questions definitely hit on targets and topics that we needed to address.
definitely. Yeah, these are like most of these questions that were asked is like stuff I hear every day and people asking me questions about too, and I'm glad I can spread some more knowledge out there too. But if you're looking for stuff on the internet too, and like you don't have access to a dietitian, because sometimes we're few and far between these days too, is biggest thing too, is I always try to look for like articles too that were like a dietitian like wrote this or something like that too. Kind of look for like who's like sourcing your information to, what's their background and things like that too. Are they an expert in this, you know? Because a lot of times we see, like we talked about, like influencers and things like
Mhm.
that these days. It's like they don't have any nutrition knowledge. They've just been doing what works for them, and that doesn't work for everybody. So
So thank you so much for this again. I hope you have a great day, everyone, and thank you for watching.